Hi everyone. Let's talk about wireframes. This is probably the topic I'm least qualified to talk to you about, but I have extensive experience working with wireframes. Not necessarily creating them, but at my own work and in the past, I've worked with pretty talented designers that were very good at creating wireframes and explaining to me the necessity for wireframes and why you might do them, and why they're so early on in the process, why they're step number 2. So the first step in the project was creating content, and that's obviously because a website by itself is just a medium. Code by itself is just a tool. If you're not saying anything with the site that you're building or the tool that you're making, there's no point to it. You can do it for fun, and you might have you might do it for artistic purposes, but there's no point if you have a website with just your name on it, regardless of how fancy that website might be. You're not saying anything new. So the step 1 of the project was compiling content. You want to know your name. You want to have all these data points about yourself written down, your email, the things you want to communicate on your site, but you also have more nuanced information that you want to show. You may have done some projects in the past. You might have done some courses that you want to show to potential employers. You might have a blog or something. You might have a DJing career. It's hard because I don't know each of you, and some of the stereotypical things that you would put down, like, project portfolio. That's a very typical thing to put on a developer portfolio. That's probably the main thing that you put, and the main thing that you want to show off, but there's so many more things you can do. You might have some other career completely unrelated to this one that you feel has lended to your ability as a developer, or has given you experience and wisdom in some way, and you want to show it off. And as you sort of compile all this information, you build up what is called an information architecture. And really, there's no way to explain it. The whole point of it is that it's an abstract kind of structure of, there's who you are, and then there's what you've done, which are projects, and each project might have a name. It might have a version. It might be paid or free. It might have a URL, a thumbnail, or an image to go along with it. And that's just for your project portfolio. You might have some other, maybe you want to show off a photo blog that you've done, and so now you have images, you have captions, maybe you're a poet or something, and so like every single thing that there is about you, everything that you want to show off to the audience that visits your site, you start to build up types of information. For example, like a project I talked about has a name and a version, some other things. But then again, you might also have, maybe you're getting your master's or something, and you want to show off all the college level achievements that you've done, or the achievements that you've made, received, done. No, not the achievements. Maybe you want to show off the awards that you've received. Sorry. And so very, very quickly, this information architecture gets to be very complicated. And so showing that to a user on your website is not a straightforward thing. You might want to prioritize the obvious, like your name, the fact that you're looking for a job or not, where you're located, things like that. Those things are kind of high priority, and they're safe. So no matter where you put them on the homepage, as long as they're like plainly visible, that's pretty straightforward. But beyond that, like, okay, so say that there's a hero at the top. Hero is just that first little section, and sometimes there's a photo on it with some text over it. Actually, let's just go to something that has a hero. my own company's website. This is a shameless plug for New Lab. Cheers to New Lab. But yeah. So this first section here, it has a hero, and I'm actually the third person on that. But you should ignore that. So this is a hero image, and once you get past that, so you might put your name there or something, but once you're past that, you have the second section. What do you put there? And you're immediately hit with this question, do I put projects there? Do I put my education there? And it's the same kind of thinking you would employ when you're writing a resume. You want to figure out the hierarchy of the things you're trying to say. And it depends on your goals too, because if you're happily employed and you're not looking for a new job, but you are trying to break out as a writer, then you might put the blog first, and you might tuck away the project section in the nav bar, or you might put it lower in the page. And so wireframing is your stage, is your opportunity to think about all these considerations in one coherent stage, one phase of the project. So you're not, if you jump into the code, you're just going to be like, I should move this there and the blah, blah, blah. And so that's why you need wireframing. It's absolutely necessary. And maybe, for just our web portfolio, it's not so complicated and it's not a big deal to just kind of wing it as you go, especially if you're a little more experienced. But with larger projects, and certainly with any kind of non-trivial web application, which presumably is the goal for many of you, if you want to build any kind of functional UI, you need to wireframe. You need to iterate on your wireframes. You need to think about these things, preferably with an expert, because like an actual designer, because they that's their whole craft, and they'll be a lot more they'll be able to hit the ground running faster than you will as a developer, probably. So preferably with someone like that to sort of inform your process. But for our needs, I think it's okay to just do a couple wireframes. So I think it's best to just get into it as usual. Instead of talking about, just the process in general, I think it is really best to go through an example. So with that said, let's just make someone up. I want to make, okay, so this is a doll from my girlfriend, and it is a capybara that we have named Capybarbara. And so let's make up a portfolio for Capybarbara. Let's just do that right now. So Capybarbara, how do you spell Barbara? Is that right? All right, anyway, so let's just spell it that way. Capybarbara, she's a, let's just make up some things. She's from Texas. She's 23 years old. Yeah, let's make it older. 29 years old. She's learning to be a front-end developer, and she has a bachelor's in, doesn't have to be related, English. Let's just make this a realistic person, not like the perfect dev. We want to make a realistic Capybarbara. So she has a bachelor's in English. She studied Codecademy, Udemy, Coursera. Just a couple. She's done some things. YouTube. She has a GitHub, so let's just call it GitHub link to her. A link to her GitHub. And let's say she's worked on 2 projects. So let's just make a new section, projects. Project 1 is, I don't know, a blog for her aunt. It's fine. Like, it really, the goal is to be realistic, and not make this some fanciful super dev. So maybe her first project was just a blog for her aunt. The second one maybe was an actual client, an outside client that was paid, and it was a CMS for a shoe business, something like that. And let's just do one more. Maybe she's trying to become an actual developer who builds applications as opposed to quote-unquote sites, like static sites or CMS websites. So let's say she built a trivial little app with jQuery, not even the fancy stuff like React or whatever, let's just say she's built a trivial little jQuery app that she's proud of, and it's polished enough that maybe she wants to show it off. So, okay, so we have this Capybarbara person. Let's keep on going. This is going to be a longer video, so just settle in. I got my green tea right here. Just settle in, and I'm not going to edit it so that you can really understand how messy of a process is this. There you go. Messy of a process this is. So, okay. So she has a couple projects. Let's just keep going. She has links. So links to her social media. She has a Facebook. We established earlier that she has a GitHub. Maybe she also has a Twitter. And she wants this website to be her blog. Okay, so she has links. Let's say she does have a blog. Let's say she had a WordPress site or a Tumblr, and she wants to move those posts over to this blog. So she has maybe, I'll just write like 15 blog posts, something like this. Okay. Now, okay, now let's say this is gonna be, I want to keep it realistic because I know a lot of people, they have these accomplishments in their life, but there isn't digital proof of it. So like, say you volunteer at an animal shelter, that is a huge thing, and if that's a big part of your life, that's something that you might be very proud of, and you want to put that online, your service to animal shelters or something like that. But animals don't issue like completion certificates. There's no course certificates for things like that, and you can't exactly like just post a bunch of photos and expect your audience or your users or your visitors to sift through all of those images. So it's tough. Sometimes you have nothing to show for all the things that you've actually accomplished, so it can be tough. But that's starting to get a little too complicated, so for this one, let's just leave it at these things. Let's keep it somewhat simple. And this is just a version 1. So remember that always. Remember that any decision that you make, any wireframe or content draft or anything that you make, it's an iterative process at every single step. So don't think about it too much. I won't think about it too much. I'll follow my own advice, and we'll just keep moving on. So let's say that this is the entirety of what Capybarbara wants to show. In terms of functionality, let's say she wants a contact me page, and that's it. Okay, so immediately now it becomes a matter of how to translate this linear text into a website architecture, a wireframe. And so in order to do that, we need to actually add a little more nuance. So let's dive a little deeper into every single one of these pieces. So learning to be a front-end developer is a little vague. So maybe front-end dev in training, and let's say like 9 months or something she's been studying. She has a bachelor's in English from some college, and she's been doing these courses. Let's just name a couple courses like Web Development 101. I'm just going to make up some courses. HTML and CSS 101, JavaScript 101, jQuery 101, and maybe jQuery 201. Okay, so she now has some things to show specifically for the things that she's been studying. And since now this is sort of its own section, let's call it education. And let's call this objective. Looking for a job in front-end development in Austin, Texas. Austin is probably the only Texan city I know. So yeah, okay. So now projects. Let's go deeper in the projects. Let's say that the name of the project is let's say her aunt's name is Katie, and the project's name is Katie's blog, And the project name for the CMS is Shoes for Life. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. So name, and now trivial little web app. Weather apps are common as a first sort of early project. So let's say weather app or weather app with API. Let's say that's the name of her project. Okay. Now the version 1.0. 1.0 is fine. You don't have to have some convoluted version number, and this is just alpha maybe because it's not really production ready. Let's say her weather app is not complete yet, so yeah. Oh, and instead of doing it this way, instead of structuring it this way, I'm going to tuck the little description that I have. So right here I have a blog for her aunt. I'm going to tuck that away as a description. Okay, so now we have projects, each with its own little data points. So we have a Katie's blog project, version 1.0, so it is production ready, and it's a blog for her aunt. Her Capybarbara's second project was, is my mic good? Capybarbara's second project was CMS for a shoe business called Shoes for Life. It's also version 1.0. Her last project was a weather app that is just called Weather App with API, version alpha, and it's just a trivial little web app with jQuery. She has 3 social media links that she wants to show off, and she has 15 blog posts. Okay, and she has a contact us page, contact page that she wants to show off. Okay. So now we have a sort of top-down understanding of who Capybarbara is. Capybarbara. How do you write Barbara? No, that's right. That just looks weird because Capybarbara. Okay. And so we have an understanding of who Capybarbara is, and now it becomes a matter of translating to wireframe. So this expression on my face is probably the feeling that you're feeling. Just kind of like, okay, where to go from here? And so a helpful question to help you get started is establish very clearly what the purpose of your site is going to be. And so let's say that for Capybarbara, we wrote it down actually. Her objective is to find a job in front-end development in Austin, Texas. That is her mission statement, and so every design consideration that she makes should be focused around that goal. It should serve that goal and do not stray from it. So if your goal is to be artistic, that's fine. But once you've established that your goal is to find a job, everything else bows to that goal, right? So, for example, if you're trying to impress employers, and let's specify it more. Let's say that in the area that she's living, there's not many startups. So let's say an enterprise job. She wants a job with a bigger company with, say, maybe like 250 to 500 people. So a bigger company. Let's say that's Capybarbara's goal. In that case, then you might not want to go the fun route. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like enterprises aren't fun, but if you're a huge company and you have real business needs and it's very urgent that you are on time and on schedule and things like that, you probably wouldn't be looking for someone who's really good at just CSS animations, right? You want someone who knows how to produce output and who knows how to work with other people in a timely way and how to delegate tasks and how to sort of just generally be no nonsense about things, whereas a startup environment might be more welcoming of that kind of creative, open-ended personality where they can innovate themselves and stuff like that. An enterprise person might just want someone who can do the job well. So if that's your focus, immediately you start to be able to rule some things out. You don't want to, let's say she had a project that was a little, maybe, let's just say controversial. Let's say she had a creative project that had some inappropriate subject matter or something like that. Let's get weird with it for a second. Let's say she had an art project like that that she did in school or something. take that out. If you have a blog post that's extremely controversial, or political or religious or something like that, take it out. And this is kind of one of those like tough situations, because I hate saying that to people. I think it's kind of sad, because a website, ideally you should be able to be whoever you want to be, and you should say the things you want to say openly and freely. But the truth of the world is, unfortunately, that and I don't know if it's that unfortunate, it's that if you portray a certain image, you just won't click with certain people. So to tailor to that effect, Capybarbara's intention is to get a job with an enterprise business, an enterprise company. So if that is her goal, take out the controversial stuff, take out the excessively political stuff, take out anything that might be too crazy. Just from the get-go, that's like your baseline. Just filter that out. And that's a little obvious, but now you can also make some branding and design considerations. So like say the color, like a bright, vibrant highlighter purple. That might not be the best choice. Maybe you want something a little safer. And I hate to say that with disdain, because even with the safe colors, like maybe like a dark blue, which is like Facebook's color, Twitter's color, LinkedIn's color, even within those safe routes, there's tons of creative options. It's not like you're pigeonholed into blue, and so now your site has to be boring. That's not the case, but it's just a different kind of design, right? Instead of animations and little illustrated, Capybarbara like people and little flying animations and fireworks everywhere, instead of stuff like that, your Capybarbara, her portfolio will be a little safer. It'll be functional, cleaner. I hate to use the word minimal because it doesn't mean that much anymore. If your website isn't like somewhat minimal, it just means it's cluttered, which means it's bad. So not minimal, but focused, shall we say. That's still bad, but you get the point, right? She wants to be LinkedIn and not Tumblr. She wants to capture like the LinkedIn professional atmosphere instead of the creative meme, ha ha ha, free-spirited atmosphere of Tumblr, because of her goal. And so with that said, let's say she chooses, let's say she starts with a color. That's actually probably not the best way, but let's just go, because again, this is a messy process. And as much as I'd like to think that I have a very structured wireframing process, I don't. Like I said before, I've worked with some designers who have taught me some of the basics, and I've seen them work and do awesome things. But myself, I just know the basic fundamentals. So let's just start with a color. Why not, right? So let's say Capybarbara decides to go with just a safe blue, just to make things easy. If you look on this page, the color of this text right here, let's say that that's the color she decides to go with. So now I have this little app called SIP on my computer. Actually, it's hidden because... Oh no, it's right here. Okay, so SIP. Let's just get the color of this text value. Alright, and then I'll write it down at the top here. So let me just write basic information. And here I'll just make a section called colors and design. Yeah, like that. And let's just put that on pause, because this is the wireframing stage, and so color has a limited role at this stage. Probably nothing, actually. So let's just put that on pause. But now that Capybarbara has this idea that she wants to be LinkedIn, she wants to be professional and clean, choosing a color is not too bad. It's not like a huge sidestep. Moving on. Okay, so now she wants to prioritize the things that will help her most in getting that job. First and foremost, let's say so she has a bachelor's in English. Whether or not you include in your college degree information, there's actually a lot of great YouTube videos on that, whether or not to include your education in your resume or your site if it's not related to computer science. I say yes. It shows that you're serious about your education. Not to say that if you don't have a degree, you're not serious, but it is another thing in your arsenal to show off, and it holds more weight than just a side pet project that you spent like 3 days on. So a lot more weight. So including the education, let's say for Capybarbara, is a priority. A lot of enterprise people, unfortunately, they do filter out just based on degree. Like, do you have a degree? No? All right, you're out. And so they will cut you out like that. So to stay in the lead in that regard, let's say Capybarbara decides to include her college information. I realized I forgot to shave. Anyways, so she includes her education at the top. Now let's say her blog posts. Let's assume things about her blog. Let's say that they're mostly professional. Let's say that there's a couple blog posts on. She was an English major, right? Capybarbara in our little story that we made up for her. She was an English major, so let's say that a lot of her blog posts are based on literary criticism, books that she enjoyed reading, and things like that. Does that help her get a job? Yes and no, right? It shows that you're a critical thinker. It shows that she's serious, and it shows that she has hobbies, which, it's not a huge factor, but even big enterprises, they're not looking for drones. They are looking for people who can help the culture of the company. So yes and no, right? This is kind of an indirect help, something like Katie's blog. If she blogged exclusively about web development stuff, then yeah, that is a direct link to your expertise as a developer. So maybe you want to prioritize that more, but Katie's, let's say it's not. So for Katie's needs, let's say we tuck it inside of the Nav Bar for now. And I know I'm not creating anything yet, but I will in a second. So let's just say she tucks the blog away. But her projects are the most visible proof that she has coding ability. You can talk about your skills. You can laundry list it. That's very common. And my own resume admittedly has a laundry list of things that you can do. To just rattle off a couple things, like even like a middle intermediate level developer will have so many things that they're able to do. You have Chrome, Terminal, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, jQuery sometimes, ES6 sometimes. You can talk about pings, like PNG files, image files, and optimizing those. So maybe you want to include a bunch of like image related things like Photoshop, Illustrator. And if you really get into it, you could just keep on going over and over. You could talk about I use Sublime Text with Vim plugins and Gulp and all these other things. It's just endless, right? But that is not proof. A lot of people do that, and then once they go into the interview and they're asked to just like left align something in CSS, they can't do it. And so laundry listing is actually not that useful. But this project, that is like the holy grail. That is Katie's, not Katie. Katie's the aunt. Capybarbara's greatest asset, and she wants to prioritize that very, very highly. So let's do that. Let's put that first and foremost. So now we know that based on Capybarbara's goals, she'll have a hero, because that's very common actually. And this is subjective, but let's just assume she wants to use a hero like here on this site. So assuming she wants to go with something like this, maybe right here can be Capybarbara's name or something. Maybe the hero could be like a picture of her in like some formal attire or something like that. This tagline could just be looking for an enterprise job in front-end development in Austin, Texas. Maybe that could be like the subheader that goes right here. And for this second section, that should be projects or past work or something like that, where you talk about, where Capybarbara talks about those projects in detail, talking about the problem that she had to solve, the tools she used to solve it, maybe a quote from the client, so her Aunt Katie, or her actual client for the CMS, or something like that. And if there's a URL to visit that site and you have the client's permission to use it, then a link as well. Those things will be the things that vouch for your ability the most, I would say. And now, here's the question though. So I went on about how your education, if you have a degree, is important to prioritize, or it's good to prioritize it. But then I went and said that projects are also like the holy grail of demonstrating your coding ability. And so right there now, you have your priority one stuff. Let's just call it by number. You have your priority one stuff, which is like your name, maybe a photo of you. Sometimes that's advised, sometimes it's not. But maybe a photo of you. You have your tagline and your objective, which is looking for an enterprise job in front-end development. But then now you have two like priority number two things. You have your education, which is a great thing to show, and then you have your projects, which is also a fantastic thing to show. And so which one do you prioritize right there on your second section? And so you could go the easy route, which is to say both. You could just have like a 50-50 break in the page, where on this page you have maybe like a little pretty block that shows your degree and your the college you went to, and on the right side you might have like project one and then some information, and maybe you have like a clickable thing so that it could do like a little sweepy slideshow within that 50% box. That's one solution. You could just suck it up and do prioritize one over the other. And maybe there's some other crazy option that you can do. But those kinds of the decisions are the decisions you have to make. And so my voice is starting to get shot. Sorry, but those kinds of considerations are the ones that you have to make for yourself. And now we're making a portfolio for a doll right now. So I can only go so far without just making stuff up and pulling it from thin air. But in your own real life, in your own real career, with your past experiences, credentials, accomplishments, achievements, projects, all of that, it is then up to you to think consciously about what is my goal, what do I want to show, what do I really want to prove in order to get my job, or in order to impress my friends. Maybe that's a valid goal too. And so with Capybarbara, let's just go a little further just to be exhaustive about this process. Let's say now that she decides that while an English major and an English degree is a very legitimate indication of her competence as an intellectual, let's say that because it's not directly relevant to her job goals, she decides to do something where the education goes second and her projects come first. Okay, so maybe that's her goal. And so now she has the hero with the priority one info, she has her projects section of some kind, and then she has her education, maybe with some more information. Maybe, since it's a little awkward to just include like, by the way, I went to college here and I got this degree, maybe she decides she can expand that into more of like a micro bio, or like an about me, or something like that. And version 1, so don't think about it too hard. So yeah, so that's her. She has 3 sections now that she has to actually wireframe, because right now I'm talking about it, and these are the kinds of thoughts that'll go through your own head much faster than I'm able to say it. But now you kind of have an understanding of how you want to prioritize things. And just to be exhaustive, there's more information that Capybarbara has. So we said that her blog post is going to be tucked away. She also has these links in case maybe a potential employer visits her site and wants to learn more about her projects, and not just the ones that she put on the site. Maybe this employer wants to check out Capybarbara's GitHub. And so she has a bunch of links as well. Maybe she wants to link to her past blog, the English blog, or something. Then those links can go in the footer, right? So now you have 4 sections. Well, 5 really. You have some kind of navigation bar, which I would argue is a must. It doesn't have to be at the exact top necessarily, but navigation, a hero, projects, education, and a mini bio section, and a footer with links to other places. And so you have this idea of how you want to order them. So now it becomes a matter of actually creating the wireframe, because talking about it is helpful and necessary, but it, with what I just said, if I just sit down to code, like if I gave those if I give you this video, you're watching this video right now, if I told you, okay, now start developing, you're not able to do that. You would still have to do thinking beyond that. And the goal is to make a brain dead sort of layout so that I can give that wireframe to any developer in the world, and they'll have a visible reference to work off of when they're developing it. So they don't have to think anymore, because all of the thinking has been done for them and converted into this wireframe. So now let's get to it. And now, because the orientation and the way my camera works, my face is going to get a little bigger as I move up here. Just ignore my face. Okay, so for my own experience, I use Sketch, and there are tons of tools out there. Literally, you could do this on pen and paper. Wireframing, yeah, you could do it anywhere. Mocking it up, which is when you take a wireframe, add color, add logos, add images, a mock-up should be done in maybe a handful of programs. But wireframes, pen and paper is really fine. That's how I do it. So don't get caught up. Don't stress about having to pay for stuff. Just get some paper, just like loose leaf or whatever, and a pencil, and start drawing it out. For the way I tried to set this up, I couldn't figure out a good layout to actually film, so I will use Sketch, which is it's like a design application, but you really don't need this, so don't think that you do. Okay, so let's just get to work. Capybarbara, right? We're trying to make a wireframe for Capybarbara. So let's say, this never ends. Okay, so let's say that we want to make the desktop version. By desktop, I mean like a desktop computer. So let me just scramble around right here. Okay, yeah, so you're staring at your laptop screen, presumably. So you know the width of the laptop is about maybe this much. Tablet is this. This is an iPad mini 1. It is extremely old, but I have to charge the battery. But yeah, this is a lot narrower, and so Capybarbara's wireframes might have to account for that. This is even smaller. This is it's about half of a tablet, and so that's when your constraints are extremely small, narrow, and you would have to refactor your layout yet again. But because this is a wireframe for a Capybarbara, let's just stick with the desktop one, because that's usually the one people have the most trouble with. Now, on the right, Sketch has this handy little guide. So if I click desktop here on the right, it'll just generate like kind of like a boilerplate piece of paper for me in the dimensions of a desktop screen. And so let's just go off this. And remember, this is a wireframe, so I'm going to omit color completely. So what did we discuss earlier? We discussed that we have 5 sections, the nav bar. So let me just make a rectangle at the top and fill it with some color. Actually, I said I would omit color, so just gray. Okay. And now we have the hero, which is this component right here. It's the color, the section with the photo as the background. So let's say we have a hero that we want to place right under the nav bar. Okay, and now under that we said that she would include her projects. So now we have another rectangle. And let me make this a different color just so it's clear. And I'm going to make this a little longer because this website is long. And now here Capybarbara can have a little bio and an about me, along with the education credential information. And then finally here maybe she has a footer with some links. Now this is a little tall. Since she doesn't have that many links, I'll just Wait, where did it go? Oh, this is it. Yeah, let's do that. And so now I'll just write something here like Nav Bar, some sort of simple identifier hero image, so that people can see what's going on. And here I'll do, what was this, the projects section. Change the color to white so we can see it, and then and then duplicate this. This was the bio and education section, and then this final piece down here was the footer. Footer, okay. So now we have this basic wireframe. I'll just say this as something. Basic wireframe of Capybarbara's portfolio. So let's just keep fleshing this out. By the end, a good question is, at what point does the wireframe finish? At what point is it complete, right? You can consider your wireframe complete if, again, you hand it to another developer and they're able to start coding based off of it. You know, they won't have colors and stuff, but they should be able to place things on the page. And so in order to do that, they need values like pixels, the size of fonts. So how many pixels is this? So let's say that this Nav Bar is, instead of saying Nav Bar, let's start to flesh it out now. So there's a home page, an about page, a blog, contact. Maybe she wants to have a dedicated projects page. So let's say that these are the links on the site. And what font size is this? This is font size 23 if you look here on the right. So now if I give this to a developer, he's able to code that piece because he knows the color of the background of the nav bar is gray. He knows the color of the text on the background, the color of the text on the nav bar is white, and he knows the font style, which is here, Source Sans Pro. He knows that it's bold, and he knows that it's 23 pixels font size. So if I give that piece to him, some developer, they'll be able to code that piece. Let's keep moving on with the hero. The hero image as we have it here is 405 pixels high. You want to, like, if it's 404, just make it rounded off. There's really no point in making it pixel perfect. So like if you're trying to go for a design where something's like 402.7 pixels, then just round it up to 405 or round down to 400. Doesn't matter. It keeps everything clean and consistent in the end. So this, for us, we have this 405 pixel height hero. I'm just gonna round it down to 400. Okay, and now we need to have some picture as the background. Let's say we decide to do that. So Capybarbara is really beautiful. So let's say we want to show off Capybarbara's face or something. I don't know. So Capybarb image. Okay, so let's say we need to get that. If you need to get something or insert it later, then you can just put it in brackets to make it clear to whoever's looking at this wireframe that if it's in brackets, it's not actually text on the page. I'm not actually writing Capybarb image on the hero. I'm just indicating that I need to get an image for the background later. Next, this hero image, let's say now we want to go with Capybarbara is her name. We want to center it maybe. This is where you can start to have fun with it. But let's make this font size 40 or something and change the font to something random. It's not going to be pretty, but that's fine. That's actually still kind of small. Let's make this 50. And then we said that this was going to be the tagline or like the subheader. So let's go and do that. Let's create a text layer, copy and paste that in. It needs to be smaller than the header, so let's see, 335. That's way too wide, so maybe I'll do a line break if it would let me. Yeah, okay, so looking for a front-end development. Okay, so bam, that's still pretty big, so let's just 25. Oh, and I know that on this monitor it looks small, but 25 pixels is pretty big. Like if I go to if I go into the source code for this page and I change this font size to 25 pixels, that's this big, so that's not small at all. And Capybarbara, which is 50 pixels, if I make this 50 pixels, it'll get this big. So even though it looks kind of really small here, in reality it's going to be about this size. So to keep it simple and to keep this hero section not that complicated, let's just leave it at this. My Siri just turned on. No Siri. Okay, so now moving on to the project section. Projects, this is the juicy bit, right, of wireframing. This is where there's like there's page-wide considerations, right? So how do I want to order things on the page? And then within one section, there's section-wide considerations. So now, how do I show off my projects? And so a common thing to do is to look at is to use components. So let me go here. Bootstrap. This is a good guide. So if I go to Bootstrap, which is a CSS library made by Twitter, then they have these things called components, which is really, over time, people have realized that presenting certain kinds of information effectively requires certain kinds of UI components. For example, like if you want a shopping list, create a list, like a list component. So is there a list here? So list group. This is called a list group according to the Bootstrap library, and this would be perfect for a shopping list, for example. Other things like like a Nav Bar, these are components that people throughout the ages, designers at Twitter have realized are very helpful in building up a website and presenting certain kinds of information and allowing users to navigate around and like identify stuff. So if you want to go to this URL, it's getbootstrap.com/components, and once you're here, you can kind of just browse around. So Capybarbara is trying to wireframe the projects section, right? So if that's the case, how might we use a component? What kind of component might we want? We want something that can show that one project is separate from another, and within each project it can show different pieces of information, like the name of the project, the version, and a description. So I believe they actually have a component just for things like that called a panel or a card. No, what are they called? Thumbnail, badges. Oh, actually, you know what? So Bootstrap is not the only one. There's also this thing called Foundation, and this is actually the one I prefer. This is the one we use at my workplace, and I use in my personal projects. They're both fantastic. That's just a preference thing, but I think, yeah. And so Foundation has this idea of a card. So this is a card. It's actually kind of ugly looking here. They did not do a good example of it. But yeah, so this is a card, and they're just demoing all the things you can do with a card, but there's a picture, a title, and some text. This kind of component would be perfect for showing projects, right? We could show maybe the logo of the project if it exists, the name of the project, and then the description. So let's say we want to use this component on our website, on Capybarbara's website. So let's go back to Sketch, and for the project section, I will create essentially a version of this. I will create this. I'll just make this red. Not because I want it to be red, but to indicate that it's an image. Just something that sets it apart. And then title. Actually, let's say it's not capitalized, so title. And let's say some text. And so, see, notice now that it's very constrained. This card that I mocked up here is a lot smaller than the card on the actual foundation website. And so now I would shrink this down, you know, maybe I'd make this a little bigger, which in turn lets me make this a little bigger. And so this is when using software actually gets a little annoying, because like, yeah, it's very clean and it's easy to do stuff like this on the page, but on paper you can kind of just do things less formally, so you don't have to constantly move stuff down and around and stuff like that. So paper is really my recommended. But so let's just say this is a project. Actually, let's fill it out for real. So where's Capybarbara's project 1? A blog for her aunt. Let's just use that. And let's say it's left aligned. Yeah. Blog for her aunt. And because we want to fill it out a little, a blog for her aunt, that is amazing and super cool. Let's say that this is the text that she wants to show. Alright, and so now I realize I have to make this a little bigger. And so yeah, this is annoying, and there's a lot of this back and forth, and it's messy. And you have to find images later for the top part or whatever. But now, once you've thought through this kind of basic like process for the project section, now again, if I hand this off to any developer, he will be able to create this section now. He'll be able to, well, he won't be able to use an image because he doesn't have access to it, but as long as he has this wireframe and the content for the section, project section, he can code this up. He knows the font, which is Anonymous Pro. Sorry, there's something on my screen. He can code this card thing because he knows that it's 328 pixels wide. I'll just make that 330 and make this 330. And he knows that the distance from this to, let's say we decided that the distance from this to some other thing is going to be, let's say that this distance right here between the title and the red part is maybe 30 pixels. If he knows that value of 30 pixels, then he can create it. Now I can do something like this where I group these things together and then I just duplicate it. And then bam. Now it messed up because I'm not taking this super seriously because I'm trying to do it quickly, but you get the point. Now we have this basic building block for the project section. We used the card component from Foundation. We populated it with the content we created in step 1, and by fiddling around and sort of moving things around, we have the start to our homepage, right? We're framing our content using best practice UI components, design thinking by prioritizing things, and we're creating a concrete, not abstract anymore, a concrete layout that this nameless developer can create. So I could keep on going, but I'm hoping that you sort of get the gist, right? Sort of get the process of how this goes. And how long is this video? It's been 54 minutes. Oh, wow. But yeah, there you go. I'm so tired. I'm sorry. This is a very big topic, and it's really hard because it's so open-ended, and there's so many opportunities at which you can branch off to an entirely new discussion. But hopefully this was helpful. Capybarbara, thanks you, and next time my setup and my camera will be better. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful, and it gets more crazy if you have, so just real quick, so like this project section that I have, maybe you decide Capybarbara had 3 projects according to our content, but let's say she had 100 projects or something, or she wanted to do like an embedded Twitter feed or something like that. Obviously you can't have 100 side-by-side cards, so then you have a new consideration. Do you create like a slideshow thing with arrows on the side, like click here to see the next 3, you know, kind of like that? Or do you create a list or something else entirely? And how does that layout change between desktop? Because this was just desktop, but if we wanted to copy this all over and make a mobile version of it, right? Let's just cut it in half, and now we're working with this much real estate. How does that happen? What happens here? This would probably move over here. This would move over here, but then now this is cut off, so you would either have to create more line breaks like this, or you would have to make the font size smaller by like 10 or something, so that on a phone it would look like this. And here you would only have room for one card, so you'd only show this, but you'd have to center it, and it just goes, it gets crazier and crazier, and more fun and more fun. Actually, this is probably a little better like that. Yeah. So yeah, lots of considerations, a lot of things to think about all at once, and it can be overwhelming, but here are my main tips. If there are just a couple takeaways, first one is do not overthink. Create your version 1 and then get it done. Don't try, if you're stuck at like the hero section because you're trying out all this crazy stuff, just skip it. Come back to it. Really, it is unprofessional to linger too much on one thing. Real developers ship, right? That might be a saying that you've heard. Real developers produce work. They don't just linger and get it perfect. Same thing with designers. So don't linger. That's tip 1. Tip 2 is don't get into colors and fonts too much. It kind of goes with point 1 about don't lingering, but if you find yourself on Typekit or Google Fonts all day, you're doing it wrong, right? Just pick one. Choose whether you want a serif one or a sans serif one. Choose a pretty-ish one and just use it for now. You could always come back to it. That's what I did. I created my entire wireframe and mockup, and I hated the font, but I didn't fix it until way later because there are other pages to make. For example, let's say we put all these things in the nav bar, but truthfully, the about page will be its own layout completely. It'll be like a text-centric layout probably because there's a lot of text. This blog thing, that's its own layout completely because now there's a dedicated page for showing itemized blog posts. The project, right now we're using cards, right? This card component on the home page to illustrate the projects that Capybarbara has. But if you have a dedicated projects page, you have more room, so it's going to be expected that you go into each project with more detail. That's its own layout. And so by the end, you have several different layouts or screens, sometimes they're called, several different wireframes, and they all have to share coherent design themes, coherent like font sizes, coherent padding values. It's overwhelming. So step 2 is don't get carried away with fonts, and step 3 is don't be overwhelmed. It is very much an iterative process. Have fun with it. I'm pretty sure the lighting changed since I started this video, so I hope I don't look like crap. But that's it. Thanks again for watching. Next video will be on CSS. Yeah, and I'm actually going to film that right now. So, yes, I hope you enjoyed. Cheers. I'm going to drink my cold green tea now. See you in the next one.